everybody. I'm Philipp Maas from the University of Leipzig, and I'm very happy to be with you today here and talk to you about early records of asana practice. And in order to do so, I will first of all start by introducing the fundamental work of yoga, the Yoga Sutra, with its oldest commentary, the so-called Yoga Bhashya, which together form a unified work, in my opinion, with the title Pātañjala Yogaśāstra. So the first question that I'm going to address is whether this Pātañjalayogaśāstra actually is a single work, or whether it is two separate works, that is the famous Yoga Sutra together with its oldest commentary. The second alternative is what you will usually find in the textbooks of Indian philosophy and also of Indology. This is a long-standing historical narrative, and the narrative of which I think that it cannot be maintained any longer. I think that there are several reasons to discard this narrative, and there's a lot of evidence in favor of the second alternative, that we are dealing with a single work, a unified whole called the Pātañjalayogaśāstra. And in order to convince you about my hypothesis, I will simply refer you to some of this evidence. The most important, or one of the more important pieces of evidence, are the concluding statements that we find at the individual chapters of the Pātañjalayogaśāstra. There we read, in the authoritative exposition of yoga that originates from Patanjali, in the magisterial Sankhya teaching, this was the fourth part on separation. And here the work ends. So according to this statement, we are dealing with a single work, a work which has a title. The title is Sankhya Pravachana, that is the magisterial Sankhya teaching. And the work describes itself a little bit closer by calling itself the Pātañjalayogaśāstra, that is the authoritative exposition, Shastra, of yoga, which goes back to Patanjali. So there is no mentioning in this colophon or in this concluding statement of two different works, and there is no mentioning of the fact that one work would be the commentary on the other work. It simply is it's showing itself as a unified whole. And if one reads the Pātañjalayogaśāstra, this impression is very much confirmed. So we have actually two levels of text, a sutra text, which consists of very brief phrases, and then we have a second level of text, which provides some explanation on this first level, but also long digressions on topics that are related to the topics that are addressed in the sutra, but that are leading the reader or listener in completely remote directions that one would never expect from simply reading the sutra text. Besides this, we have very, very early quotations from the Pātañjalayogaśāstra, and these quotations are not, as one might expect, quotations from the sutra text, but they are quotations from the text of the Bhashya. So this happens already from the 5th century onwards. And in the 7th or 8th century, we see that the work as a whole is reflected in the work of poetics, where Magha, a famous kavi or poet, draws upon the Pātañjalayogaśāstra in order to use it for his poetical literature. Besides this, we have references in comparatively early Indian sources that quote passages of the Bhashya part with the words Iti Patanjali. And that shows that the author of these passages believed that the Bhashya was also composed by Patanjali, as was the Yoga Sutra. So how did it come that we read in the textbooks that the Yoga Sutra is an independent work and that there was a later commentary called Yoga Bhashya written by Vyasa? Honestly speaking, I actually don't know for sure. I can only speculate about this. One reason might be that in Indian philosophical traditions, it's very usual to have a base text, a sutra text, and then you have a commentary. And that the philosophical thought develops along the lines of commentaries, base text commentaries, and sub-commentaries. And that some medieval author thought that this convention should also have applied to the yoga tradition. There are also works consisting of auto-commentaries, where a single author compiles a base text and then a commentary on the base text. But these are rarer instances and maybe a little bit unconventional. So in any case, it is clear that the Yoga Sutra and its Bhashya part, which together make up the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra, were composed or compiled approximately the same time. And because of the reference of the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra in its sutra and in its Bhashya part to the philosophy of Vijnanavada Buddhism, it is clear that one can date the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra to the time after the 320 to 400 of the Common Era. This is the date of the Buddhist thinker Vasubandhu, who wrote the Abhidhamma-kosha and the Abhidhamma-kosha Bhashya. This is one case of an auto-commentary. And the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra clearly refers to this work, and there is no doubt that the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra must have been composed after the time of Vasubandhu, or immediately before Vasubandhu, when a philosopher who held similar ideas as Vasubandhu for the first time brought these ideas up in the philosophical discussion. So whenever you read that the Pātañjala Yoga, the Yoga Sutra is a work which has been composed in the second century of the Common Era, this is clearly anachronistic and this is clearly wrong. And whenever you read that the Bhashya was composed a couple of centuries after the Yoga Sutra, you also read something which for which there is no evidence. The work itself, by the way, does not mention any alternative interpretations of the sutra text. So it is very clear that the person who wrote the Bhashya part was very much convinced that he had direct access to the meaning of the sutra text. The Bhashya does also not discuss any variant readings, any different readings in the sutra text. So for him, it was clear that he was writing on the sutras in their original form. And all this evidence taken together, in my view, clearly hints to the fact that the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra was composed by one author at the time of approximately 400 of the Common Era, and not earlier, and also not very much later, because we have already early quotations from the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra in the early commentary on a work on the grammatical philosophical tradition, that is the Vakyapadiya by Bhartrhari, and also we have references in a commentary on a work of Nyaya tradition, in the Nyaya Bhashya. There we have quotations from the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra, and we have references to ideas that are very much specific to Patanjala Yoga. So we can nail down the time of the composition of the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra quite exactly. And with this hypothesis in mind, we are in a much more favorable position to interpret the Yoga Sutras than we would be if we would only have the sutras. Because the sutra, the Yoga Sutra, as you all may know, consists just of 195 very brief phrases that are open to a wide range of different interpretations. The sutra text has been used frequently by modern authors to project their own ideas of yoga philosophy onto this text, and then to claim that they have detected the original meaning of what Patanjali may have said. And I think that these attempts can be, how should I say, appreciated as the attempt to create a new philosophical thinking on the basis of older material, but the claim to have found the meaning of what the sutra original were composed for, that has to be rejected. And if we want to know what Patanjali had to say about yoga, then we have to take the commentarial passage of the Bhashya very, very seriously. And this is what I'm going to do in this presentation here, and also in the rest of my work. And here I will focus, of course, on asana practice. So, what does the Pātañjala Yogaśāstra have to say about asana practice? So the first mention of asanas occurs in Yoga Sutra 229, where 8 auxiliaries or means for yoga practice are mentioned. And these 8 auxiliaries are mentioned in the following way. The 8 auxiliaries are commitments, obligations, postures, asana is the Sanskrit term, breath control, withdrawing the senses, fixation, meditation, and absorption. Now, the Sanskrit text is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhayo, ashtav, angahani. So we see that posture appears here in a sequence of terms, and this sequence of terms is not just a collection of things that might in some way or other be relevant to yoga, but this series of terms is a sketch of the way towards liberation from the perspective of Sankhya Yoga, which starts with the commitments and obligations. These are ethical ways of living, about which I will talk in a minute. And then more technical aspects of yogic practice, namely postures, breath control, and then a series of psychological devices and meditations, namely the withdrawing of the senses from the objects of everyday experience, the fixation of the mind towards the object of meditation, then meditation or visualization, dhyana, and in the end, absorption. That is a way of deeply engaging meditatively into the ontological difference between matter on the one hand, prakriti, and purusha, the individual soul or pure consciousness, and the insight into the ontological difference between these two realms of being, between consciousness and matter, that leads to the liberation of the purusha from prakriti, the liberation of consciousness from matter. So, what are these ethical obligations that a yogi has to take? These are first the 5 commitments. Yama, consisting of non-violence, of speaking the truth, of not stealing, of chastity, and of not possessing property. And these are 5 vows that have to be kept throughout the lifetime of the ascetic. And as we can see from this collocation of terms, these are terms that apply to full-time ascetics who have renounced their family and social obligations completely. So that means that yoga, according to Patanjali, has to be practiced from full-time ascetics, not from householders, but from people who live outside the society and have completely devoted their life towards achieving spiritual liberation. So, and then there are 5 obligations, niyama, that are specific for certain groups. So the terms nema and niyama occur in different contexts, and they are sometimes filled by different religious and philosophical groups with different terms. But for Patanjali, the niyamas consist of purity, of satisfaction with the personal living conditions, of asceticism, of studying for oneself, and of dedication to God. One thing that might be interesting to mention further with regard to the commitments to the yama is that the yamas of the Patanjala Yoga are identical with the 5 vows of ahimsa that we, the 5 vows of Jainism, starting with ahimsa, that we see as being foundational also for Jainism, and it appears that Patanjali Yoga may have borrowed this idea from Jainism, or from a common cultural substratum from which both philosophical or religious systems, this of Patanjali and that of Jainism, have developed.